It's time for another episode of Gospel Preaching Live, brought to you by the Kearney Church of Christ, which meets at 406 North Clark in Kearney, Missouri. Make plans to come out and visit the brethren, who look forward to seeing you. And now the host of Gospel Preaching Live, Richard Dodson.
Welcome back to Gospel Preaching Live. We try to come with the Lord's message every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. And I'm glad you were able to join us this evening. If you have any comments or questions about this or any of the shows, you can call or text me at 816-686-9517, 816-686-9517, and keep in mind I'm in the Central Time Zone. You can also email me at gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. That's gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. Again, I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube and you'd like to leave a comment, go ahead and do so. I'll do my best to be able to oblige any requests that you might have. If you have just want to make a comment and like the episode and share it with other people, hey, I'd appreciate it. That's something I'm doing this for, is to try to take the message to the whole world. And so I'd appreciate your help in doing that. Tonight's lesson, we're going to talk about something that you find in the Bible quite a bit. It's called the Lord's Highway, and it actually makes reference to a road, a path, a highway, a way, commonly talked about in the New Testament. Either way, it's a pathway that we've seen talked about all throughout the Bible. And I thought tonight we would talk about that very thing. I call it the Lord's Highway. I think it's pretty evident that's what it is. But we can talk about it. We can look at some people who've traveled this highway. We can try to learn from some mistakes or successes that they've had in the past. And that might help us to glean some understanding about how we should travel the Lord's Highway. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the lesson. The text of the lesson will be Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 8 through 10. Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 8 through 10. Prophet said, or the Lord said, I guess through the prophet, it was inspired by the Lord, a highway shall be there, meaning it will come to happen. And it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it. It shall belong to those who walk on the way, even if they are fools. They shall not go astray. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come up on it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Now, with any understanding of the Bible, we're going to know that what he's talking about this is going to be a road for Christians to travel on. Because one of the things he says, it's a road for the redeemed. It's the ransom of the Lord are going to travel this road. But it's called the highway, and it's called the way. And I think Isaiah is foretelling this way of holiness. I think he's foretelling what's going to take place through Jesus Christ. Now, there's things in this passage that we need to look at pretty, a little more in depth. But I think, first of all, for us to have an understanding of this road, we need to go back in time. Kind of like the movie Back to the Future. We got to go back in time. We're going to get in our DeLorean and try to get it up to 88 miles an hour so we can go back in time. Well, you can do that in the Bible. That's kind of neat. Of course, you're not in a DeLorean. You don't need that to do it. But you can learn much about the Old Testament by going back and reading the history. And it's there for us to be. 1 Corinthians 10 makes it very clear. It's there for us to be able to learn. So let's just go ahead and do that. If we go to look at this highway and how Moses used it. Now, if you remember Moses, he led the Egyptians out of Egypt. He met the Lord appeared to him in a burning bush and passed on the information to Moses that he wanted him to go into Egypt and appear before Pharaoh and lead his people out of the bondage and bring them to him at the base of Mount Sinai. And eventually he would take them to the promised land, the land that the Lord had promised to Abraham. And the Lord wanted to fulfill that promise. So this was going to be the path of the Israelites. This was going to be the path that Moses would take. And again, we can learn a lot by seeing how they traveled that road. Because the Lord, however way he treated them, is the way he's going to treat us when we travel that road. So let's go ahead and take a look. First of all, there's some things that we need to understand. In Exodus 13:17, we find out that the Lord was going to lead them down this path. It said, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So what I wanted to use this passage for was to show that, yes, that the Lord was going to lead them on this path as he leads us on his highway. But I think what we really need to notice, and this is what backs up what I just said a minute ago. The Lord treats everyone the same. And in 1 Corinthians 10:13, there's that passage that you may be familiar with. It says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you to be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that path, that road, that you may be able to endure it. Well, that's exactly what's taking place here. The Lord did not think the Israelites could handle the easy path. The easy path would be leave the land of Goshen and go straight on across the wilderness by the way of the Philistines and get to Mount Sinai. But that's not what the Lord was going to do. Now, of course, he had also some mind. He wasn't done with Pharaoh yet, but what he was concerned about, his main concern, he makes it very clear. He was afraid that the Israelites would see the Philistines, and when they saw this, and they would return to Egypt. So he was afraid of them being too weak of faith to be able to make the easy route, you might say. So he had a different route in mind. And so that is very, sometimes the Lord says no to our prayers, and maybe there's a reason for that. Because, he doesn't think that we can handle the temptation. And we can see that the Lord was doing that with the people he led on this highway in Exodus 13:17. And then I just threw in 1 Corinthians 10 just to show you he's not changed. He does that with the people who are on that highway today, still watching over them, still shepherding them, making sure that they are not being tempted more than they're able to bear. Now, in Exodus chapter 13 and verse 21 through 22, we start seeing how the Lord provided on this way. It said the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them, as we mentioned, along the way. That's the highway, the path. And by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Now, I threw this in there just to show you that, again, the Lord is providing. He's providing for his people as they're traveling this pathway. They can't travel at night. It's too dark. They'd stumble, they'd get hurt. So the Lord gave them light that they might travel at night. He's providing for them what they could not provide for themselves. Now, of course, we know of other provisions. I didn't put in the slides, but we know how the people needed food. And so the Lord let it rain manna from above, and the people would eat for a long time. They ate. That's what provided food for them. And from my understanding, that's like a coriander seed. You can look it up, but it's tasted kind of like a vanilla wafer from what I'm understanding. I'm not, I'm no expert on that, but that's my understanding of it. But that was their food. They would gather it up and eat that, and it would come down from heaven. And of course, you know the story of how the people got water out in the wilderness. Moses, would bring water out of a rock. Um, so that took place. So the Lord provided. That's the thing I'm trying to get across. He provided leadership, he provided shepherding, and he provided the things they needed: the food and the water and the light, even to be able to see. He provided these things, and so that's important. Now, in Isaiah chapter 51 and verse 10, down when the Israelites were backed up against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh had decided his heart was hardened and he was coming after them. He was going to bring them back and make them slaves again. Well, what does Isaiah say about that? He says, "Was it not you who dried up the sea?" Speaking of the Lord, "the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over." And you just can't help but see so many like comparisons, like our type, anti-type. I mean, there's so many things that you can see on this highway, and you can see it here with the people. The Lord provided a path, and that path for them, this highway, took them under the depths of the sea. They walked on dry ground, but he separated the waters. And of course, they came up on the other side and they were saved from Pharaoh again. They were saved from bondage. And the comparison with baptism is just inevitable. People who are walking on the Lord's highway today, but when they start, they are baptized into Christ, according to Romans 6. That old man of sin died. He is now buried with Christ in a watery grave of baptism. And he comes up out of that grave, and he's now been redeemed from bondage. He's been saved, just like the Israelites were saved from the bondage of Pharaoh. Now the sinner has been saved from his previous sins. He's now in Christ. And so you can't help but see the type, anti-type that is illustrated in First Peter chapter 3. It's just there all the way through there. And I would invite you to look more in depth at this, because it really is a fascinating study when you compare all the ways that the Lord handled his people when they were on this path. You can see so many of the similarities with the way that he handles people who are traveling that same path today. Now let's skip ahead. Okay, we just talked about Moses, the Israelites, but let's talk about the Israelites after they'd sinned. And of course, you know what happens when they turn their back on God and start serving graven images. What was to happen? What happened to them? They would be invaded, carried off into slavery, and they'd have to be there until the Lord brought them back again. And it was unfortunate, but this happened. And so this happened because what the Lord wrote through Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 27 through 29, that Moses was warning the Israelites. And he said, "The Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and you shall be left few in number among the heathen. Whether the Lord shall lead you, and there ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him, if thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul." So did that take place? Yes. Yes. The Lord did bring them back from bondage after they had been sentenced, judged for turning their backs on the Lord. And one such instance that we see, and it's an interesting to read about this as well. Josiah, King Josiah, when he funded the rebuilding, the cleaning of the temple, they found the lost book of law. And there was something in there that he read that scared him. In fact, he sent the prophets to find out if this applied to Israel. And I figure it's probably something like we just read in Deuteronomy, something like that. And he found out, yes, the Lord was very upset because of the sins of his grandfather Manasseh and Jeroboam and whatnot, and they had not repented. But in fact, it says in 2 Kings 17:22 through 23 that the people of Israel walked in all the sins that Jeroboam did. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had spoken by all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day. Okay, did they come back from Assyria? Yes, they did. And it was foretold in Isaiah 11:16. It says, there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that remains of his people, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt. So he's talking about a highway for the Israelites coming up out of Egypt. And now he's talking about a highway. There will be one coming from Assyria so that the people of the Lord can get back to him. And what do we see along those highways each time? We see the Lord watching after his people. He's trying to do what he can to make it easier for his people to come back to him. In Isaiah 42, verse 16 and 17, we read, I will lead the blind in a way, a highway, that they do not know, in paths, it's a highway, that they have not known. I will guide them, leadership. I will turn the darkness before them into light, the rough places into level ground. It's providing. These are the things that I do, and I do not forsake them. They are turned back and utterly put to shame, who trust in carved idols, who say to metal images, you are our gods. Yeah, that's the penitent. They know what they did, and they said it's wrong. They know that that's something that they can't do. But notice what the Lord does. He's removing obstacles, making it easier for them to come back to him. That shows the Lord's love and care for his people. Now let's jump ahead. Now, again, this is a fascinating study, and I would very much invite you to look at this more in depth on your own. But I can't talk about it in depth as much as I would like to in the time I have. So I'm trying to introduce the topic to you so that you will explore this, because there's a lot more that you can look at and find comparisons and learn more about how the Lord treats his people and bringing them to him. And then the final one, of course, is the Lord's highway. And that's during the Christian dispensation. And of course, we understand what the Lord's highway is. When Jesus, when he lived on this earth, he said, I am the way in John 14 and verse 6. What is he? He's, I'm the way. I'm the highway. He goes, the truth and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So that means that road goes to God. Now, what road, where did the road lead to when they left bondage in Egypt? It led them to God. Where did the road lead to when they came from bondage like in Assyria? It brought them back home to God. I mean, they were with him. And so this road that we're traveling, that Christians travel on, if they have to understand this is Jesus Christ. And it's going to take them to the Father, because no man cometh unto the Father but by Jesus. So you got to be walking with Jesus, traveling his way in order to get to God. And that's nothing new from the beginning, as we've seen. That's the way it's always happened. Now, this starts back with John the Baptist. Isaiah spoke of John the Baptist, and he says in Isaiah 40 and verse 3, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. And how did he do that? That was what he was trying to do for Jesus. He was trying to prepare the road for Jesus. And in other words, I think we're going to see that he was trying to prepare the hearts of men for the teachings of Jesus. And we see this, his father Zechariah spoke this in Luke chapter 1 and verse 76 through 79. He says, you, child, will be called the prophet of the Most High, for you, speaking of John the Baptist, will go before the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people in the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the sunrise shall visit us from on high, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. So, it all started there with John the Baptist bringing us to Jesus Christ. And he had to teach the Israelites in order to prepare their hearts so that they could travel on that road. Now, in Isaiah, our text again, I want us to look at specific things about that text that talk about who travels on that highway. He says, and a highway shall be there, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The way of holiness. That's a big clue. That means it's the way of Jesus Christ. And if you read in the book of Acts, all throughout the book of Acts, you're going to find references to Christians and the way they lived. And it was always made reference to as the way. In Acts chapter 9, verse 1 and 2, when we are first introduced to the Apostle Paul, before he was the Apostle Paul, he was Saul, and he persecuted the church. And it said, Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus. So if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. The way. They belong to the way. Well, who's the way? The way is Jesus Christ. You belong to Jesus Christ. You've been redeemed. And so we can see then that this, and again, I'm going to let you study it, but if you go through Acts 9, you're going to find this Christianity referred to as the way many, many times. And I found that to be interesting. Now, if we go back to our text again, he says the redeemed shall walk there. Now there's two things about this. The redeemed, that tells you about what specific people are walking on this highway, but then it also says they walk there. And walking also signifies something as well. But when we're talking about the redeemed, we're talking about those whom Jesus Christ purchased with his blood. Now, if you go to Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4 through 7, it says, when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, which is Jesus, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who are under the law, so that they might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. So it was Jesus who does the redeeming. And that's specifically what takes place with Christians. In Titus chapter 2 and verse 11 through 14, another passage that speaks to this, he says, the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great and Savior, God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession, who are zealous for good works. That's right. And what did Paul say he was looking for? He was looking for people who belong to the way. Well, that's because these people have been redeemed. They've been redeemed by Jesus for his own possession. They are zealous of good works. But something else. Remember, we talked about walking on that road. When we're talking about walking, we're talking about how you're behaving. And what they do is they renounce ungodliness and worldly passions. They live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives. Those are the people who are traveling the Lord's highway today. And those are the type of people that we should want to be. We want to be redeemed, and we want to walk this walk, traveling the way. If we act like that, then we know we're going to be pleasing to God. 1 John 2 and verse 6, he says, whosoever says he abides in him, speaking of abiding in Jesus, ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. Yeah. Jesus is the way. So if we're going to walk in the way, we're going to have to walk the way he walked. Because if we're not following him, we gotten off the way. Jesus is going to guide us, as we've already seen. He's guiding us, and he's providing for us to get us to God, to get us to heaven. But we're going to have to make sure we walk with him in the same way in which he walked. And that means we have to behave the way he behaved. Well, that means renouncing ungodliness. All right. Those are the three examples I had from the Bible of the Lord's highway. The question I have for you is, are you headed this way? Have you been redeemed? And if you don't know, then that's something that we need to talk about. Have you renounced ungodliness? Have you been walking the way Jesus walks? In other words, have you been behaving the way he behaves? Now, if you're doing those things, then you're traveling the Lord's highway. And the Lord is shepherding you, he's guiding you, and he is providing for you. He's doing all those things that you need him to do to help you get to where you want to be. But if all those things I described to you from our text don't apply to your type of life or living, then you're not traveling the Lord's highway. You're on the wide path that leads to destruction. And I would highly recommend you change your route before you come to the end of the road. All right, that's the lesson I have for you this evening. If you are ever in the Kearney, Missouri area, hey, come and worship with us. We meet at 9:30 Sunday mornings for Bible study, 10:30 for worship. We meet at 406 North Clark in Kearney, Missouri. And you can learn all about the church by going to kearneychurch.com on the internet. Now, on kearneychurch.com, you're going to see some links, some buttons that'll take you to our Facebook page. You'll find information there, and you'll also have a couple of links, one to our YouTube channel, as well as the Berean Spirits YouTube channel. And on the Berean Spirits YouTube channel, what we try to do, that's an internet show I'm a part of with 3 other preachers. And that airs every Thursday at 10 o'clock. I'd like to invite you to join us. You can watch it live by following those links. And you can take part by making comments in the comment section. And if you miss an episode, you can always go use those same links to go back and watch previous episodes, because they're saved there. You won't lose them. And I think some of these have been loaded up on various platforms where you can download them on your cell phone or whatever type of device you might have, and you can listen to them as you walk in the neighborhood, or if you're driving in the car, you can listen to them as a podcast. So I'd invite you to do that. It's a Bible study, just me and 3 other preachers, and we try to study like the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. If you like this lesson, you might want to tune in every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock to KPGZ 102.7 FM in Kearney, Missouri. I try to bring a lesson every Sunday at that time, 7 a.m. Central Time. And if you are outside the Kearney area, you can stream it on your mobile device. They do that as well. Okay, that's all I have for you today. The next time, Lord willing, I come to you will be this Thursday at 7 p.m. Until then, remember, this is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice in it and be glad.
This has been Gospel Preaching Live. Join us each week as truth is taught, faith is examined, and beliefs are challenged. Be sure and hit the like button so you can be notified of future episodes. And to watch past episodes, go to our website, kearneychurch.com. This has been a work of the Kearney Church of Christ.